Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Hope things are okay at your end. So we continue our classes on research methodology. So what we were discussing last day was collection of data. So collection of data, we have done substantial amount. Some major part of classes we have taken the last four lectures, and we continued in the last lecture. We studied the case study method, which is one of the important method in sociology research, as we learn from definitions, assumptions, advantages, and disadvantages. So there we did the case study method. So we concluded our class with the challenges which are faced in data collection. So what are the challenges? The access to the participants. Accessing the target population or participants can be challenging, especially in sensitive or hard to reach communities or organizations. Sample size and representative. So this was another challenge. Determining an appropriate sample size, statistically significant representative of the population of interest can be challenging. Okay, a small sample size or a biased sample can compromise the validity of the findings. We discussed how it affects the social research, and also in case of technical research, we did with the help of microscopic just techniques, how small design selection can be erroneous. Third, we discussed data quality control, how the quality control of the data affects the data collection. And then finally, the time and the resource constraints. So all this we did in the last class. And also we ended up with data recording. Means what is the how recording observation, maintaining records, sample history, transparency. So all these four are the main criteria of data recording. So we did all these things in the last class, and we continue today's class with processing and analysis of data. In research methodology, in research stages, we come to the one of the important stage, which is processing and analysis of data, which comes after you collect the data, after data collection. So what are the processing operations? First is editing. Editing of data is a process of examining the collected raw data. So whatever data you have examined, so you have to examine the collected raw data, especially in surveys, to detect errors and omissions. Okay, and wherever to correct where these possible. Okay, so this 2 times 1 has written. So in editing of data is a process of examining the collected raw data. So whatever raw data you collected in surveys or in survey data collection, or even in whatever data you collected for scientific research in an equipment. So you plot it in using some probable suitable software. Softwares will be discussed in subsequent classes by Kalul sir. Probably he will come after 2 of my lectures. So editing of data is a process of examining the collected raw data, okay, and to detect errors and omissions and to correct these when possible. As a matter of fact, editing involves a careful scrutiny of the completed questionnaires and or schedules. Editing is done to assure that the data are accurate, consistent with other facts gathered, uniformly entered as completed as possible, and have been well arranged to facilitate coding and tabulation. So editing is the first step in processing or analyzing the data, where the collected raw data is analyzed for detecting any error, omitting any unreliable data, correct some incorrect data, and careful scrutiny of these. Okay. What it helps? It helps in the subsequent stages of analysis. What are the subsequent stages? The subsequent stages are coding, classification, and tabulation. So what do we refer to coding? So coding refers to the process of assigning numerals or other symbols to answers so that responses can be put into a limited number of categories or class. So in data collection, we analyzed how case study, how questionnaires, how schedules can help in collecting the data. Now you have the data, you sit down, you first edit it for removing any unrealistic data. detect the error for omissions, correct any incorrect data which you have generated wherever possible, and then you start coding it. So coding means putting relevant data or responses in certain categories. So whatever data you collected in a case study or schedule or questionnaires, you separate it out into groups or categories. Such classes, so why it is required? Such classes should be appropriate to the research problem under consideration. Okay. They must also possess the characteristic of exhaustiveness, that there must be a class for every data item, and also that of mutual exclusivity, which means that a specific answer can be placed in one and only one cell in a given category set. Another rule to be observed is that of unidimensional, by which it is meant that every class is defined in terms of only one concept. Okay, so you have one concept. So you have one concept which has to be defined as a class, and whatever the different concepts under consideration, you have to categorize the data and form into groups, and this is known as coding. Okay, so coding refers to the process of assigning numerals or other symbols to answers so that responses can be put into limited number of categories or classes. So after coding, you go into classification. Most research studies result in large volume of raw data. It's okay. It's also true for scientific research. You have large volume of raw data. You have to properly code it and classify it, whichever you want to take and whichever you want to discard, and wherever necessary you want to repeat, which are erroneous. Okay, which must be reduced into homogeneous groups. Most research studies results in large volume of raw data. So during collection of data, we do not think so much. We keep on collecting, and when we sit to analyze these data or the processing, we have to go through groups like editing, coding, and then classifying. So classifying means whatever large volume of raw data you have gathered must be reduced into homogeneous groups if you have to get meaningful relationships. Okay, this fact necessitates classification of data, which happens to be process of arranging data in groups or classes on the basis of common characteristics. Okay, so previous one coding was there based on single concept. Here, whatever common characteristics are there, you classify and try to form relationships. And then for sociological research or for questionnaires, schedules, you have to do the tabulation. In scientific research, we also do tabulation as well as we generate graphs, right? Which can be termed inside tabulations. So when the mass of data has been assembled, it becomes necessary for the researcher to arrange the same in some kind of concise and logical order. Okay. This procedure is referred to as tabulation. So what is tabulation? When a mass of data has been assembled, it becomes necessary for the researcher to arrange the same in some kind of concise and logical order. So ordering your data into an arrangement into a concise and a logical way is nothing but tabulation. Okay. Thus tabulation is the process of summarizing raw data and displaying the same in compact form, that is in the form of statistical tables or graphs for further analysis. In the broader sense, tabulation is an orderly arrangement of data in columns and rows. So in a table, you generate tables. Definitely, every one of you has created tables of the samples which you have analyzed, and this process is known as tabulation. So after collecting the data, generally you make tables of different samples initially, and then state their characteristics. So an orderly arrangement of data in columns and rows is known as tables, or tabulation is the name given to such operations. Okay, so analyzing data consists of all the four things: editing, coding, classification, tabulation. And after that, there are specific analysis, I think, which you have already done in Ramia Ma'am's classes, where she has thoroughly gone through the different analytical procedures of your data. Okay, so rigorous analysis concepts or mathematical concepts she has already gone through, how your data can be properly analyzed in a quantifiable way. So we are not going into those repetitions, so that has been covered already. Now, I just gave a glimpse of the analysis of data, whatever data you have collected, how we will analyze 4 steps. So she have gone, so after collecting the data, you do editing, coding, classification, and tabulation. And then after tabulation, you properly analyze through quantifiable techniques that has already been covered. And we are skipping. So we are not going again into that, okay? And we do not have time also for that because we have other part to complete. This is the next part. 2 parts are there. First is interpretation. So interpretation of the data, interpretation in research. What is, do you understand by interpretation? Why interpretation is required? How you will do the interpretation and precautions while doing going into interpretation. So what is interpretation? So from definition, it says drawing inferences from the collected facts after analysis and experiment. So you do a data collection and you analyze it, and then you draw inference from it, and that is known as interpretation. Just this search for a broader meaning of research finding. So I think it is clear, and everybody, all of us in scientific research also, after collection of data and analyzing data, in the conclusion part of our journals or in the thesis also, which you will write, you have to interpret or provide inference, or in the form of some theory, propose some theory, or in general relationship between various factors or variables, like that. Or what you establish a broader meaning of your research findings. So this is just a proper interpretation of your collected experimental data and analysis. So what are the major aspects of interpretation? Establish continuity in research by linking studies. Develop explanatory concepts and frameworks. And what is the scope? Explore relationships within data. Okay, so we have collected a lot of data. Say, for example, as we discussed during our initial days, so somebody who is doing research on materials for some property evaluation, say it can be electrical property, magnetic property, or catalytic property for material research. Okay, so some property of the material can, you have generated data for the physical properties of the material, chemical property of the material, and the property of the interest, which is the microstructure, the sintering properties, or chemical properties, or electrical properties, or catalytic properties, or magnetic properties, whatever it is. And finally, you will deduce a relationship between one property and the other. So that is, you are establishing property, structure, property, or correlationship. You can tell correlationship between various properties. So it extends beyond data to theories, hypotheses, and prior research. Okay. Clarifies factors behind observation. So it's how it helpful in nature. It's research. It clarifies factors behind observations, provides theoretical guidance for future studies. So whatever correlationship you establish for a particular material, other researcher might be interested to establish such correlationship for another set of materials. So your research interpretation can be a beginning for some other research or for other researcher. Okay. So it gives theoretical guidance for future studies and future researchers. So it is very important step in research, that is the interpretation of your collected data. It gives you the broader meaning of your research finding with the help of establishing correlationship between various factors of your data. It extends beyond data to theories, hypotheses, and prior research. Okay. It clarifies the factors behind those observations and provides theoretical guidance for future studies. So why interpretation is required? Why? It is through interpretation that the researcher can well understand the abstract principles that works beneath his findings. So this is a very important step which gives you better understanding of what you are doing. So once you start interpreting your first research, you get more and more clarity for your second research. It can be a building block or a foundation stone for your subsequent research. Through this, he can link up his findings with those of other studies having the same abstract principle and thereby can predict about the concrete world of events. Fresh inquiries can test these predictions later on. This way, the continuity of research can be maintained. So during my research, I can tell if you go through the papers, my thesis period. So one page work we completed, we published it, and then the conclusion was used in the abstract of the next paper. So this way, the continuity of at least three works, not the all works. It's all three work in a specific topic and a specific materials we continue. So basic fundamental work, we establish the relationship, co-relationship, then we extend it to an enhanced case study, and then extend it to some other materials, the same similar data collection or similar interpretation was used for a different set of materials. So this is how interpretation helps, and really during interpretation, it gives you clarity of what you are doing and gives you the direction for your future research and also direction for others in that field. Interpretation leads us to the establishment of explanatory concepts that can serve as guide for future research studies. It opens new avenues of intellectual adventure and stimulates quest for more knowledge. Okay. Researcher can better appreciate only through interpretation why his findings are what they are and can make others to understand the real significance of your research finding. So you present, during your presentation, you show a lot of data, right? There are classes and presentations as well. Later on it will be taken. Researcher can better appreciate only through interpretation why his findings are what they are and can make others to understand the real significance of his research findings. Okay. So this is how the research interpretation is crucial. The interpretation of the findings of exploratory research study often results into hypothesis for experimental research. And as such, interpretation is involved in transition from exploratory to experimental research. So interpretation, why it is important? It can also help in its transition from exploratory to experimental research because during an exploratory research interpretation, you propose some hypothesis, which forms the building block or the foundation stone for some different experimental research. Since an exploratory study does not have a hypothesis to start with, the findings of such study have to be interpreted on a post factum basis, means after doing the work, in which case the interpretation is technically described as post factum interpretation. Okay. So this is why how interpretation, why it is important. So it is important because of 4 reasons. 1, 2, 3, and 4. The first is to maintain continuity in research, because your interpretation can be the foundation stone for future studies. It provides new avenues. Your interpretation can provide a new avenue or a new direction to future research, right? So it can provide new avenues for future research. So first is it establishes continuity in research. It opens up new avenues for research, future research. Researcher can better appreciate only through interpretation why his findings are what they are and can make others understand the real significance of his research findings. The real significance understanding by the researcher himself and others can be done with the help of proper interpretation, and then we can transit from exploratory to experimental research with the help of interpretation. So this is why interpretation is very important. Now, what does the technique of interpretation involves? So technique of interpretation involves the following steps. Number 1, researcher must give reasonable explanation of the relations which he has found. Okay. First is providing reasonable explanations. And he must interpret the lines of relationship in terms of underlying processes and must try to find out the thread of uniformity that lies under the surface layer of his diversified research findings. In fact, this is the technique of how generalization should be done and concepts be formulated. So you have to provide a reasonable explanation of your observations, right? And explain the underlying processes or the established relationships. Okay. So in fact, this is technique of how generalization should be done and concepts be formulated. Second, what is the second technique of interpretation? Second technique is extraneous information, if collected during study, must be considered while interpreting the final research of research study, for it may prove to be a key factor. Extraneous information can be a key factor in understanding the problem under consideration. Definitely. So whatever data you are collected from day one for a particular study, an extraneous information can be a free factor during understanding of your problem of consideration. Okay. Third, it is advisable before embarking on final interpretation to consult someone having insight into the study. So technique also involves consultation with experts that we have done in discussed in previous classes as well, how consultation with experts, supervisors, or person in the similar field helps you. So during interpretation also, such type of consultation is suggested or advised. So it is advisable before embarking upon the final interpretation to consult someone having insight into the study and who is frank and honest and will not hesitate to point out omissions and errors in logical argumentation. Such a consultation will result in correct interpretation and thus will enhance the utility of research studies. Means just it will uplift your quality of research by consulting with experts because they will point out the deficiencies and also point out the main focus of your research or give a direction of your research. Researcher must accomplish the task of interpretation only after considering all relevant factors affecting the problem. So you have to consider all relevant factors affecting the problem to avoid false generalization. So false generalization needs to be avoided. It's very difficult and important also as well. We have to properly consider before giving a proper information, logical, all the factors, all the different data, extraneous information that you've collected, so that any generalization which you are making is not incorrect, right? You must be in no hurry while interpreting results, for quite often the conclusion which appeared to be all right at the beginning may not be all accurate. So a lot of time you have to spend during interpretation. In fact, data collection can be done quite fast and interpretation will take a lot of time. And also consult literature, which is not mentioned here. So in interpretation, the techniques involved are generalization and concept reformulated, but any extraneous information should also be considered because it can form a key factor of the generalization. You consult experts and literature, so that you enhance the quality of your research. And finally, that you take your time and propose the generalization only after considering all factors affecting the problem, so that you are foolproof about your conclusion and the conclusion is not erroneous or false, or whatever relationship you establish is repeatable, right? Precautions. So here comes the precaution. What are the precautions? At the outset, researcher must invariably satisfy himself that the data are appropriate. So for proper interpretation, you have to have proper data. Trustworthy and adequate or enough for drawing inference. So you are drawing some inference, the data has to be on appropriate, collected from a reasonable source, and also substantially large enough for drawing your inference. Okay. So the data reflect good homogeneity. So it should reflect good homogeneity, means it is reproducible, and also the data has a good analysis of the various factors which you have studied. The proper analysis has been done through statistical methods. This is what I was precisely telling, that a proper statistical analysis has been done. Okay. The researcher must remain cautious about errors that can possibly arise in process of interpreting results. Errors can arise due to false generalization or due to wrong interpretation of statistical measures, such as the application of findings beyond the range of observations. Okay. Identification of correlation with causation and the like. Another major pitfall is a tendency to affirm that definite relationship exists on the basis of confirmation of particular hypothesis. In fact, the positive test results accepting the hypothesis must be interpreted as being in accord with the hypothesis rather than as confirming the validity of the hypothesis. The researcher must remain vigilant about all such things so as the false generalization may not take place. He should be well equipped with and must know the correct use of statistical measure for drawing inference concerning his study. Okay, so this is all about inference. Next, what are the precautions? He must always keep in view that the task of interpretation is very much intertwined with analysis. So during analysis step only, you start interpreting your results, you note down, okay, and cannot be distinctly separated. So analysis and interpretation cannot be separated, because during the analysis process itself, you are analyzing, doing a statistical analysis of this data, whether it is correct or whether it is partially incorrect or whether it is can lead to false generalization during interpretation. All that you can start during analysis step itself. Okay. So interpretation cannot be separated from the analysis, but okay, it forms a separate topic as such. As such, he must take the task of interpretation as a special aspect of analysis. It is nothing but a special aspect of analysis, and accordingly must take all those precautions that one usually observes while going through the process of analysis. That is, precautions concerning the reliability of data, computational checks, validation, and comparison of results. So you have already undertaken various statistical analysis of your data, many classes, where you have gone through the list of precautions that are considered for the reliability of data. You do computational checks, validation of your data, and comparison of results. So all those things during analysis itself you are doing, and during that stage itself, the interpretation of your data is starting. So it's not a clear-cut boundary between analysis and interpretation. Instead, it's a continuous process. He must never lose sight of the fact that his task is not only to make sensitive observations of relevant occurrences. See, making sensitive observation of relevant occurrences, this is not only the case, but what is beyond that? But also to identify and disengage the factors that are initially hidden to the eye. So whatever you are not able to, so proper, if you give substantial time for the interpretation of data, you can bring out new insights. Okay. This will enable him to do his job of interpretation on proper lines. Broad generalization should be avoided, as most research is not amenable to it, because the coverage may be restricted to a particular time, a particular area, and a particular condition. Such restrictions, if any, must be invariably specified, and results must be framed within the limits. So for sociology research is taken for a particular time of the society, means particular time, a particular area of the society, and particular conditions. Okay, so those should be properly mentioned so that the broader generalization is not taking place. Okay. The researcher must remember that ideally in the course of a research study, there should be constant interaction between initial hypothesis, empirical observation, and theoretical conception. It is exactly in this area of interaction between the theoretical orientation and empirical observation that opportunities for originality and creativity lie. So this is very, very important. If you see what it is mentioned here in a textbook, that the researcher must remember that ideally in the course of a research study, there should be constant interaction between initial hypothesis. So many classes back, we studied about initial hypothesis. Then we went into many stages. Okay. research design, data collection, observation. So whatever you propose during initial hypothesis and whatever you observe through experiments, and then whatever you propose during your interpretations, that is the theoretical conceptions or the theoretical generalization you will proposing, they are properly linked. A proper link must be there. It is not that when you are writing a journal paper, you are suppose say for doing for a material, you are pointing out in your introduction the properties, say the catalytic properties of the material and the data you have collected from electrical properties, and you propose a generalization for magnetic properties. It is not possible, right? So from initial hypothesis to the data collection, from empirical observation to theoretical generalization proposal, all should be in one line, or they should be in the same line, and proper linking or interaction between all these should be there throughout. Otherwise, we lack originality, and we will be able not be able to convince our research, okay, to himself. Outside is very difficult. It is exactly in this area of interaction, that is the interaction between theoretical orientation and empirical observation, that opportunities for originality and creativity lie. So this is all about interpretations. So we studied what is interpretation, why interpretation, how interpretation, and precautions. So what is interpretation? Why we are doing the interpretation, technique, what we are following, and the precautions which we should maintain. Okay, that is, we should always keep in track our initial hypothesis and empirical observation during interpretation. During analysis itself, we should start the interpretation process and proper validation. Okay, and final stage of we come into the final stage of your research stages, that is report writing. Okay. So what is the significance of report writing? So research report is considered as a major component of the research study, for the research task remains incomplete till the report has been presented and or written. So you have done till interpretation and proposed a generalized for theory, but unless and until you are convinced and you can make other convinced through a report or a presentation, your research is still incomplete, right? So you have to make a very attractive report, right? And this is a very important part of your research. Some people are equipped with the general talent of writing very nice reports, right? And some may not, but they can develop with continuous efforts, right? So what are the steps we will go through? So what is the significance we understood? That is the significance that research report is considered a major component. So you will think the research design, data collection, and everything is major component, but report forms a very big component because it is the report which will go to the examiner. The thesis will go to your external examiner, who has not gone through whatever pains you have gone through data collection, interpretation, analysis, but ultimately he will just read the report. So it has to be very well organized, right, and well presented. So it forms a major component, right, of the research study. For the research task remains incomplete till the report has been presented and audited. You do a lot of research, you do a lot of data, but you publish no papers, then how you can justify your research, right? So we have to squeeze in the good data, analyze properly, and then publish. Or if you are doing some confidential work, then you have to generate a very nice report and present it to the examiner. As a matter of fact, even the most brilliant hypothesis, okay, highly well designed and conducted research study, and the most striking generations and findings are of little value unless they are effectively communicated to others. So it is to the reports that you are communicating with the scientific community, isn't it? So it is very important. Different step in writing reports. Research report is considered a major component of research study, for the research task remains incomplete till the report has been presented and or written. As a matter of fact, even the most brilliant hypothesis, highly well designed and conducted research study, and the most striking generation and findings are of little value unless they are effectively communicated to others. Research reports are product of long-term, slow, accurate work. So I have given a lot of pain in proposing your hypothesis, then your research design, collection of data, analysis and interpretation. Now you sit and do the report writing after a long-term study. The steps involved are logical analysis of the subject matter, preparation of the final outline, preparation of rough draft, rewriting and polishing, preparation of final bibliography, writing the final draft. So these are the steps which we follow during our report writing, right? So first is logical analysis of the subject matter. So the subject matter which you are proposing to do research has to be logically analyzed. This is the first step of your report writing. It is the first step which is primarily concerned with the development of a subject. There are two ways in which to develop a subject. A, logically, you can develop a subject logically or chronologically. The logical development is made on the basis of mental connections and associations between one thing and another by means of analysis. Logical development often consists in developing the material from simple possible to most complex structures. Instead, chronological development is based on a connection or sequence in time or occurrence. The directions for doing or making something usually follow the chronological order. Okay, so you develop the subject matter, or develop your subject. Okay, so you do a logic analysis of it. This is the first step of your report writing. So what is the second step? Second step, preparation of final outline. So you all have to do the presentation, making the presentation or preparing the draft. Already you have presented or written journal particles, or you have presented oral presentation or posted presentations in various symposiums. So what you do in those cases is you make an outline, right? How you will present it. Means the headings or the subheadings or the slide headings, right? So what are outlines? Outlines are the framework upon which long written works are constructed. So definitely you must be writing the outlines. It is well documented and well experimented and established procedure that you will do outline generation at first step. Here an aid to the logical organization of the material and reminder of the points to be stressed in the report. So wherever you want to stress doing analysis, only you keep in mind, and then which points to be stressed, which point to be minimized, which points to be omitted, or which point to be discussed in details. You make a outline of the frame or the framework of your research. That you do in case of journals as well, journal articles. You do in case of poster presentation in symposium. You do in case of slides during your presentation or your annual viva. So you make an outline. You try to make an outline, and you for research thesis also you have to first make an outline how you will go about. Means what are the chapters, and in the chapters what are the major subheadings we will be considering. Okay, because some subheadings you will omit which are not necessary, and some which you will stress will build it further subheadings, right, and explain in more detail. Then comes, after the final outline, the preparation of the rough draft. Now you start writing under each and every chapter and every subheading and sub-subheadings. So preparation of rough draft, this follows the logical analysis of the subject and the preparation of the final outline. So after the outline, you start filling up the gaps, right? Such a step is of utmost importance for the researcher now sits to write down what he has done in the context of his research study. He will write down the procedure written by him, means the experimental chapter, in collecting the materials for his study, along with various limitations faced by him, the technique of analysis adopted by him that he will mention, the broad findings and generalizations in the conclusion chapter, and the various suggestions, future scope, he wants to offer regarding the problem concerned. So mostly the rough draft, what you will consider, After the final outline, you start explaining each of the subheadings that you have outlined in the previous step of writing a report. And in each of these, you mention about the after the analysis of the subject or the introduction of your research, what hypothesis you are going to analyze during your thesis or your research work, the procedure you have adopted in one chapter, how the experimental data you have generated, the technique of analysis you have adopted, the broad findings and generalization, okay, in terms of conclusion of each study, and the various suggestions that you want to put forth for your own next study or for other future studies. Okay, this is how you, in very good flow, you keep on writing. At that stage, don't think about correcting or errors. You keep on writing, okay? Because the next step consists of rewriting and polishing the rough draft. So the rough draft, you whatever is in your heart, you pour it out, okay? So in rough draft, your head, heart, and hand, all three are continuously in process. And then during rewriting and polishing, so our intellect comes into picture, and also other research means consultation. We always give a lot of stretch with those other experts in the field, with literature, to polish whatever you have written as the rough draft. So this happens to be the most difficult part of all formal writing. Usually this requires more time than writing of the rough draft. The careful revisions makes the difference between a mediocre and a good piece of writing. While rewriting and polishing, one should check the report for weaknesses in logical development of presentation. The researcher should also see whether or not the material as it is presented has unity and cohesion. Does the report stand upright and firm and exhibit a definite pattern like a marble art? Or does it depend on an old work of molding cement and loose brick? Okay, these are phrases. Let us not go into these phrases because we are mostly concerned with scientific research, but you have understood that you have to rewrite and polish your rough draft to a very nice, cohesive, short, and attractive report so that it is well understood by everybody in shorter time and in flow. The fifth is the preparation of final bibliography, means references. So you have to put in, as I told you, in each step you consult experts. So you acknowledge them, and in each step you have to consult the literature. So you refer them. Okay. Next in order comes the task of preparation of the final bibliography. The bibliography is generally appended to the research report is a list of books in some way pertinent to the research which has been done. In our case, journal papers, right? It should contain all those works which the researcher has consulted. It's very clear and you all know this. And finally, writing the final draft. This constitutes the last step. The final draft should be written in a concise and objective style. It should be concise. It should not be very broad, precise, concise, to the point. Okay. And in simple language, so that everybody can understand. Avoiding vague expression such as it seems, there may be. So if you still write maybe, the examiner may not be convinced. While writing the final draft, the researcher must avoid abstract terminology and technical jargons. Illustrations and examples based on common experiences must be incorporated in the final draft. So the illustrations and examples, means the tabulations, the graphs, are the most simplest way of communicating your findings to the research community, right? So the illustration example based on common experiences must be incorporated in the final draft as they happen to be the most effective in communicating the research finding to others. Okay. A research report should not be dull, must enthuse people and maintain interest and must show originality. Okay. It should not be dull. This must prove to be enthusiasm to the people so that they maintain their interest and go on reading and also show originality. Okay, something new you have found in research. It must be remembered that every report should be an attempt to solve some This is very important. Every report should be an attempt to solve some intellectual problem and must contribute to the solution of a problem and must add to the knowledge to both researcher and the reader. So during your drafting, from the initial subject matter proposal to the final drafting, there should be a coherence, concise, and a solution oriented to an intellectual problem. And it should be continuous and linking so that it is good for the scientific community who are reading, going through this, and they are enthusiastic to read it and maintain interest in it and start research in that area, right? If it is original. So this is how you should write your report. So this is the assignment. So what are the questions? What are the common challenges in data collection? So we have mentioned. State the techniques involving data interpretation. That also we have mentioned. Interpretation is fundamental component of research processes. Explained. So this is similar to this, or interpretation, art of drawing inferences depending upon the skill of the researcher. Elucidate the given technique of interpretation. So this is also related to technique. Explain the significance of research report and narrate the various steps involved in writing such a report. Okay. So next class we'll discuss a little bit of about writing, and then we'll go into revision, means revising whatever we have done during the last. This is my 12th class in research methodology in module B, and 3 classes I have taken in research methodology in module A. So total 12 plus 3, or next class I will take 13 plus 3, so 16 classes. We need to revise, right? Otherwise, we may not I myself in my presentation will not be able to solve the problem, right? Or a proper presentation, because as I told you that the presentation should be coherent, concise, and attractive to the other researchers. Hope you like the lectures and understood at least some part. Okay, so we'll do some revision and assignment oriented so that it becomes easier for you to sit in the exam and write whatever the exam form. Thank you. The exam pattern is still not decided. We'll discuss. Otherwise, we'll discuss in details. If it is objective time, we'll give some objectives, and this subjective will give some subjective. We'll discuss what are the important points from the next class, next 2 classes. Okay. Thank you.